What up, what up, what up? Checking in with a mic check. I got a special guest right here, man. My man Siobhan Williams from the
Yes,
Living
sir.
Room podcast, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes, man. We had an offline conversation that I was like, you know what, we need to bring this online and bring it to, the editorials. And it was about Wale being underappreciated. No, Wale has new music coming out. Wale just signed the Def Jam. I think that's a great acquisition for Def Jam. And yeah, I wanted to bring Sharon on to introduce himself to the audience, introduce people to the article that he wrote on accordingtohiphop.com. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just ready for this weekend. Get to watch some football, man.
Hell
So
yeah, man. And
there's some
right
good
when
music dropping this today too, as well.
it was, man. Did you get a chance to listen to that Rick Ross and Meek Mill album yet?
No, but I'm definitely gonna get to it before the end of the day because I've been anticipating how that's gonna sound.
Yeah, I mean, you got that FAMU jersey on. I know you from Florida, so of course, I had to ask about Ross while you're here. I listened to maybe the first 4 or 5 songs of it. Me and Coop, we probably gonna do a full review on it. We are gonna do a full review on it, and it was sounding good from what I was hearing so far.
Yeah, like from the singles they put out there sonically, it just sounds like that feel of Ross's albums that it just seems cinematic so far.
Yeah.
So I was looking to see how that was gonna mesh with the sound that you get from Meek's albums, and it was the cool thing about this. It was unexpected for
Mm-hmm.
me to see them going into making a joint album. So I'm interested in how it's gonna sound and what we're gonna get from them as far as content this go around.
Now I knew that production wise it was gonna be there,
Mm.
but like you said, my question was like, how is Meek gonna sound on this stuff? And from what I'm hearing so far, like I said, I'm only like 4 or 5 songs in. Meek sounds good on here. You know what I'm saying? And Meek is doing his thing, and he came forth doing what he does. He's spitting.
Definitely.
Is Meek in that? Well, I guess Maybach Music. There it is, right there. Meek and Wale are in a similar class, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I guess to give people a bit of a backstory on where this conversation even came from, you and I were on the phone we were talking about hip hop in the 2010s, excuse me,
Hmm.
and just that new class being ushered in and all the great work that they did that I think a lot of people are appreciating now more than they did when it was happening. But you were living it. Those are your college years. So, I mean, can you speak a little bit about the 2010s era of hip hop before we get into the whole Wale article and conversation?
Yeah, definitely. Like coming in from that 2008, 2009 ish run, that was like the peak of like Wayne's career, the Carter Three, and the mixtapes he was putting out. But he was also introducing a new team. His squad, Young
Right.
Money. You get the Tigers, the Nickies, the Drakes. Coming out of there. So he was ushering in his artists. But then on the flip side, you had a lot of new artists that was now making a name for themselves or bubbling in the mixtape world. In Atlanta, you had, the Migos coming out in that 2010 era that was making noise in the mixtape era. And then they took off once they did Versace and Drake hopped on it and whatnot. And then you still had Wiz, you had Currency, you had Dom Kennedy, you had Chip the Ripper, which now King Chip. Um, you had a lot of people coming into the forefront or coming into their own followings, and it was capturing the college crowds. I remember I didn't get to catch this concert, but there was two big things that I missed out on being too cool for school. On campus, I remember I was like, when I moved off campus my sophomore year, I was like, man, I'm never going back up to campus unless I need to class. And this specific day, I missed it because that was the time where Wale and J. Cole came and did a surprise performance
Mm.
and gave their gym and fam. And I missed it. And it was that everybody that went was telling me how intimate it was as far as them being there of the people. And I think that was Wale coming off attention deficit. And I think if I got the timeline right, I think that's when uh, J. Cole was coming off the warm up.
Mm.
So it was like a lot of noise. He had just was signing to Rock Nation. I think Wale was coming into being under Rock Nation management, if I'm not mistaken. So that was one of those moments I missed out on. The other moment that I missed out on was being able to go catch Currency or with in the club performances and whatnot. But it was
Mm.
a lot of noise, a lot of reinvention of artists coming back, like Juicy J or Two Chains redefining himself and career. So it was a good moment, but it was also a good moment for the clubs because we got Travis Porter, we got K Camp, we got you know people of that realm, and being in FAMU, we got a lot of regional stuff as well because it's Jacksonville, Miami, Tampa, or whatnot. So South Florida, we were getting Iceberg, we were getting Triple C's and Rick Ross, we were getting a lot of people coming into the fold of there that was making noise, not only in Florida but Atlanta's. They were introducing so many new artists to the game.
It was a
So
melting pot going on for sure.
yeah, it was
Blue.
a lot going on. It was interesting, but that's the time where I was able to be in a place where everybody's coming from different cities and everything, and just introducing me to their music. And my first roommate in college was from DC, and he used to be like, "Hey man, you ever heard this Wale guy?" And I was
Mm,
like, "Yeah, I heard Nike Boots at the time. I
that
think
was
that
the
was
first
like
one I heard too.
more familiar." And it's funny because that's the reason why I wear Nike boots today. Like I fell in love with them since the ACGs and stuff. So, but um, he put me on the Wale, and then I had a classmate, and she's from DC, and she's like one of the biggest Wale fans, and I started listening to it. I loved the sound, and I was introduced to J. Cole just by being a Jay Z fanatic. Man, he's my favorite rapper of all time. So when Jay put his stamp on something, or he goes and signs somebody, I'm automatically gonna go listen to him. So
Oh, nice.
um, yeah, and I seen
We could
J.
go
Cole
down a
come.
whole rabbit hole with the Jay-Z conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, always. Yeah, I argue so many different angles and debate that on Jay. But it was just a hell of a time for music, and you know being open to hearing different things. Of course, we got the Drake. Of course, the Drake then is not the Drake we have now. I mean, the sound sounds completely different, and it's went through its evolution phases. But even Drake had some noise out there, and what he was doing with comeback season and things like that. That was dropping around that 2010s or that time when I was in college. That era of music. So it was very interesting too.
Blue Collar Hustle sent in a super chat. He says, Peace Mike, Nas, and Killer Mike were both nominated for Best Rap Album at the Grammys. KD3 and Michael, which one are you pulling for? I'm Atlanta born. I love Killer Mike. I met him when I was interning radio back in the day, but I think KD3 is the better album. So I'm rooting for that, but I wouldn't be mad either way. Some people are saying in the chat, man, Dumb It Down. Shout out to Dumb It Down. He says, Wale is not the most underappreciated, just never lived up to his potential. Now, what do you say to people who have that notion and that narrative when it comes to Wale?
So when people say he hasn't lived up to his potential, I'm wondering what is the bar they want him to be at. Is it the numbers or is it the popularity? Because the content's there. If you really listen to Wale's music, he's been fairly consistent, and the content has been there as far as the perspectives.
Right.
You could listen to a song named like Chain Music, and even if you listen to what he's saying, there's still some content there, but you'll probably get lost in a beat or it being a little bit more braggadocious Wale. But in those lines, he's still saying stuff. It kind of reminds me of um, when Jay will go back and he references his early albums and how people now like they listen to Big Pimpin' or things like that, and that's what the lane they want him to stay in. But if you say anything introspective, then it's like he's fall off, or they question his ability to if he's still that top tier rapper.
You're
So
quoting him straight up from ignorant
yeah,
shit.
so it's funny when I hear that about Wale. And I have criticisms of my favorite artists. I do. I'm not afraid to be objective at all, and I understand because I wasn't a big fan of Wale's Shine album. I wasn't. But one thing that I did give credit for is this guy is Nigerian. He's doing Afro beats music. How much what I'm saying? How much more authentic can you get from that versus other artists that doesn't even have that background or that's using that sound because it's the popular sound out now. I do think the thing with Wale is I feel like any artist, sometimes we get caught up within our own genius. You've seen it with Kanye, you've seen it with some individuals that wants to do the type of music that they want to do, but you also know that if you want to make music for yourself, then just make it and sit up in your room and listen to it on your own. There's a
Right.
whole world that's waiting to hear stuff, and you can't please everybody. And so, my question back is, what is the? Do you want him to be at a Drake level, where at the point where he could put out, and all respect to Drake, but Drake could put out anything right now, it's gonna go number one. I mean, I wasn't a fan of this last album. It was not bad, but it wasn't what I expected. But it still had the opportunity to do those numbers. The singles had the type of chart success that you would expect from a great album. So that's when I ask people, what potential are you looking for? I mean,
I
or
think, not
what
to
peak do you expect
interrupt
from
you,
the
but
label?
I think where a lot of people go, and Wale's always mentioned this, is like the whole Kendrick and Cole thing. Now, I think what separates Kendrick from his contemporaries is how highly regarded his album making is and his albums are. But when it comes to Cole and Wale, what do you think the big separation is there? Where do you think? Why do you think Cole gets so much more adulation from that class than Wale does?
Oh man, I think um, I think some of it has to do with features, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that's just a small percentage of it. But if you see Cole's feature run this year, it's been amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that Cole doesn't do a lot of interviews. So when you do listen to Cole's interviews that he do versus Wale, sometimes Wale could lose you because it comes off as complaining when it's his frustrations with the music industry. If you're not understanding what he's saying, he was like, when I was doing 600 bins or 500 bins, I forgot the name of it, I'm sorry. But in that and chain music, people love me. But if I go do a song like Black Bonnie or Shades or whatever, then it's like, what do you want? You know, it's
Does
like
Wale
trying to
have bigger hits than J. Cole? I mean, I'm seeing people saying some songs in the chat, and I'm thinking like Wale might have bigger hits than
while
Cole.
Wale has, to me, I think he has a better catalog of commercial singles than Cole. You know,
Mm.
but I think Cole's music just, it's hard to hate Cole because you haven't been able to see him from a negative perspective. I mean, he's embraced people like a Lil Pump to Soldier Boy recently when he gives love to the game, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like you never hear anything negative coming from it. You never you never just really could paint him in a bad light, and the music kind of complements that a little bit because not only does he pay homage, but he kind of shows love to the younger rappers. Not saying that Wale didn't have the chance to do that. It's just like when we hear Wale's interviews, like when he used to go on the Breakfast Club, it's like he's speaking a journal to life, like things that you would probably keep in a room of your peers is now expressing his frustrations publicly, and you know it gets to a point, and I think false what was it, False Prophets by J. Cole. I mean, I think he kind of like, you know, sent some lines to Wale, and it's like, hey, you should, you know, to the sentiments of you're so caught up in this when you should be focusing on that core, that
What do you
appreciation.
think about that? I forgot all about that. What did you think
Yeah,
about that? I guess
I mean,
exchange
it's
on
true.
records.
It's true. I mean, it's to me. I didn't take it as a diss. I took it more so of a friend keeping it real. You know, me and my friends have to have some uncomfortable conversations sometime, and sometimes be like, "Hey, man, you know this or that." But for him, it was just like, "Hey, man, you're an artist. You're great. Don't focus on the negative, man. Let's focus on here. There's people that love you. Let's cater to these people." And I kind of, compare that to me up and coming on what I do with music media and whatnot, because it's like early on you're like, man, people are not following me. People are not. Man, I'm doing all this good stuff and there's no love there, but you can see somebody else doing all this and they're getting all the love. And when you start to frame your mind like that, it takes you away from what your main objective is in the people that actually love you. Cater to the people who love you.
Run your own
Those are the
race.
people who support you, And the outside noise, if they don't support, then fine. If they come around, you know who's the real supporters and who's not. And so that's kind of like the idea of how I've seen that. And even me as being a music consumer and a music lover, and I watch tons of interviews, I kind of feel like, that Wale frustration kind of lost people in a sense because it came off as like probably complaining or whining, and nobody wants to really hear that from a rapper, you know?
Well, let's talk about your article that's on accordingtohiphop.com. The title of the article is Wale's Journey from Adversity to Artistry. Tell us about the title and some of the things about the article without giving it all away.
Well, the title came from the sense of me looking at his career, and to try to sum it up in a nutshell, Wale has an interesting career because he has the ability to give you classic material or give you music that people love, but he also can display inconsistency. And the reason I say that, and some of it is not to his own fault. I mean, the label situation, you know how that goes when sometimes you may have an artist may have a single in mind they want to release, and the label's like, no, we're going to push this single. And you've seen that with Attention Deficit, but his mixtape success, he had multiple mixtapes before Attention Deficit, but, the mixtape About Nothing is what kind of skyrocketed him to being in people's ears and wanting to check for it. So when you listen to Attention Deficit, that's actually one of my favorite Wale albums, and he probably wouldn't probably say the same because the control aspect of how you want to put that music out. But Attention Deficit, I feel like it lost people because the first single being with Lady Gaga was more of a pop record, and you listen to the album, it kind of stands out like a sore thumb on the album.
Yeah.
And that album had so much content, so many topics, I felt like people could not put him in a box. Because he had so many different types of topics everywhere. And I think some of the songs on there is great. I mean, you got Diary from there, you got Contemplate, you got Beautiful Bliss, you got Let It Loose with Pharrell. I mean, the production and the features, the songs were there, but it just on sequence, it probably sounded like it was everywhere.
Yeah, did it seem like a true representation of who he was as an artist?
Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, I somewhat feel similar ways about Kendrick's Good Kid, Mad City. People love Good Kid, Mad City. It's a great album. It's well put together. And I felt like that was more of an industry album for that individual. And when I heard To Pimp a Butterfly, I felt like, and I could have been wrong, I felt like that's the album that he wanted to make, right? And then, when you go past that, it seems like that might not have been true either. But I see what you're saying. At that time period, it was real. I think the labels were really trying to differentiate sonically from the mixtapes to the albums, the studio albums. And I think for a lot of artists in that time period, Big Crit being one that stands out for me, their mixtapes were better than their studio albums. And it felt like you said, the studio albums were trying to cater to people who weren't already their grassroots fans, and some people just never grew out of that. And I think that could have been one of the things with Wale, but I feel like he continued on and was able to give you bangers. He has more of a, would it be fair to say that, I guess it might be more comparable with Drake and maybe J. Cole, because he does have a female fan base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with Drake, it's interesting. Drake, Cole, and Wale, interesting, different types of careers. Even though they came out around the same time or hit their peak around the same time, their careers went in totally different ways. I feel like Drake found out that what commercial success should do. And the closest thing I can amount Drake's career to being as far as trajectory is that similar following a Jay-Z blueprint. When, some people have a lot to say about Jay due to how he appealed early in his career, the big pimpins and things like that, and what they sum his music up to be on that commercial scale. And I feel like Drake kind of followed that blueprint of being one of, you have a Cole, you have a Wale, you have a Kendrick, but I feel like Wale takes on that superstar, everything that comes with being a rapper, the women, the just the beefs, he takes everything on that you would want of a rapper. And, people can say whatever they want about Drake, but he has done everything you would want a rapper to do as far as taking on the fame. And J. Cole is more of a recluse. He'll pop out, do an interview every once in a while, but if he doesn't have an album or any music dropping, you kind of don't see him in the limelight. Just like Kendrick. Kendrick is like not a presence at all, and then he'll pop up and do an album, and it's just like their careers is different. As for Wale, he didn't stray away from interviews. He didn't stray away from doing music. I just feel like a lot of outside noise started to come into play with his content. So the reason why I said from adversity to artistry is because that first debut album wasn't great. It wasn't received by a lot of people number wise, but he goes and drops more about nothing. He speaks about it seemed like he got to get his real thoughts and opinions off, and you have the label changes, and you go in MMG and they do the compilation album, but then you get Ambition, and that's where you get the commercial records like Lotus Flower Bomb and things of that nature that's coming out, and that now pushed him into the limelight where people are starting to love him, but the core following is still getting what they want out of that album, but he's still kind of finding that balance of commercial success. And you start to see that. You see that was his first number one album with The Gifted, but Ambition missed that number two, which is still great. You have a number two album, that's great.
Oh yeah.
But The Gifted was the number one album, even though Ambition had more commercially sounding records. The Gifted is kind of like where you start to hear more of that DC influence, as well as the type of music that you kind of feel is more of his sound. And so you start to see that wave of him finding his way, and then it starts to seem like he's starting to second guess a lot of his music choices and stuff like that. And I can't think how he thinks, but this is how I've observed everything. And then you'll do something like that, and then you'll hit like a slump where you give an album like after Ambition, it was The Gifted, and after The Gifted, it was the album About Nothing, which is a great album. Great.
Well,
album,
let me ask you this. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this real quick. What do you think about the new stuff Wale has going on, and what are your expectations for the new album?
Okay, so me being a big hip hop head, I love the names of Def Jam. When I hear Def Jam, it rings classic hip hop. But let's be honest, much love to Def Jam, but it's just not the same as people saying, "Oh, you signed a Def Jam." It doesn't just hit the same, because I can't name you artists that I know who are currently on Def Jam. But on the flip side, I think it's a good move for him, because I feel like they're going to give him the opportunity to do him. And I think he figured it out. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say now, because I feel like not only did he figure it out, but I don't think he cares about the outside noise anymore. I feel like he's now going to be, when you're at this point in your career, you're now doing music that you want to do. He has faced all the criticism he could face. What worse could it be?
He understands who his audience, like you said, that audience that's going to rock with him. He understands who that is now, and now it's time to really double down on that audience. And the people who really never rocked with you probably aren't going to rock with you moving forward anyway. So do what you do best. And I feel like he did that with his previous album. And, we spoke very highly of it because he was in his lane. And one thing about Wale, whenever he does what he does best, he does that better than any of the contemporaries that he compares himself to, or that he is compared to. And I get it. He came in with those guys, and everybody's careers went all different ways. And, people are saying things like they're saying in the chat right now, that he underperformed. And I think they're comparing that to his contemporaries. But I think the type of music he makes and does really well, might not be the kind of music that's just going to cross over. But the weird part about it is he does have the hits.
Yeah.
And so, you can't say he don't have that. You just mentioned he got a number one and a number two album. Like, those are great things to have.
Exactly. Two number ones at that, because The Gifted and the album About Nothing, they both were number one albums.
Yeah.
And although he'll give you a couple albums that are not the most successful, he still has big singles off those albums. PYT was great on chart success, but Shine was an album. You'll have these you have these albums that come out, and the reason why I have From Adversity to Artistry, because he turns that adversity into art. He knows what wasn't successful, and he knows how to come back from that. He's like, okay, y'all wasn't rocking with me on this one. I got y'all on the next one. I'm gonna show the doubters what I could do and all that. And he has the, if you look at music today, and if you don't think that Wale deserves to be in the talks of that, that's interesting because I think we can make far worse arguments for that class.
Well, let me ask you this
artists.
though: what's his impact? And I mean, I know we're gonna get out of here in a second, but yeah, what's his impact? What would you say is Wale's impact based on what he's done from the beginning of his career to now? Does he have any sons running around here?
Yeah, in a sense. Yeah, in a sense he does. I feel like he made it cool to be vulnerable. I know a lot of people like to credit a lot of that to Drake because, that was kind of his lane. But Wale has a way of not only catering to his woman audience, but also kind of genuinely more speaking to the perspective of the woman audience and also giving you the vulnerability of a man being able to talk and on certain topics. And you can hear that with shades on attention deficit. You're talking about colorism and what it was like for him being a dark-skinned male growing up. I mean, I know what that's like. So when I hear stuff like that, or when you hear songs like 90210, talking about that type of stuff that goes on in Hollywood or whatnot, and a lady, woman being up there and that stuff that goes on, like, there's content there that he makes it, even when it's uncomfortable, he makes it cool to be able to address on records, and it doesn't seem like you're pandering, because I could hear a record and I could tell this person was trying to make a hit. Oh, I see, he wanted to appeal to that base. It seems more genuine from him, I would say.
Well, all right. Well, yeah. Go check out the Wale article on accordingtohiphop.com. I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming through, and I appreciate you giving Wale his flowers because I don't think we do that enough. Is there anything you want to leave the audience with before we get out of here?
Yeah, just look out for more of my takes on stuff. I'm not afraid to speak the opinions or the unpopular opinions. I'm not a person that just like to go against the grain just for the sake of getting rises. There's things I'm passionate about and I can speak to. Just follow me on my IG, Jashad904. That's JASHAAD 904. I have videos of my show that I do on there, and you can also check that out on all streaming platforms. It's called The Living Room Podcast, spelled LIVIN, The Living Room. And I do it from in here. This is my little space that I have.
Nice.
Perhaps in the basement, type feel. And man, I'm never afraid to share my opinions and talk about music, man. Hip hop is something I was always a lover of, and I still have that love for the culture and all fundamentals of hip hop.
All right, make sure y'all go check out that article. And yes, sir, Mr. Williams, I appreciate it. Let's do this again sometime. All right, talk to y'all soon. Y'all have a great Friday. Happy Veterans Day to everybody as well. I meant to start off with that. All right.